Awesome. So we're here to debate a very new topic, intents versus OFTs. Literally everyone has talked about them. But we have the OFT fanboy here, and then the intense leader over there. So I would let both of you actually give an opening statement about your projects and why you think OFTs are better, and why do you think intents are better?
After you.
Thank you. I'm Angus Lamps, Foundation Lead at Stargate Foundation. Stargate is a liquidity pool and OFT-based bridge built on top of the LayerZero protocol. I think that message-based bridging is the actual solution to interoperability as we're seeing today. We'll get into all the details. But
Hello, Josh from Aori. We operate a solver on a lot of the biggest cross-chain intense systems, as well as we are about to release, is this recorded?
yes.
Okay, never mind, I won't say anything. We do a lot of cross-chain pricing and on intense systems. I guess I'll leave it at that. But I guess, did you want me to also say something about intense as well?
No, it's good.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, so how are we going to do this? We're going to have 4 categories where we can debate which one is better, right? And I want to start with something that we can actually disagree on, maybe. So the first one is security of user funds, right? I want you to describe why you think OFTs have better security of user funds and why you think intents are a safer solution.
I think that with OFTs or generally message-based bridging, the fact that every single message that is being sent, every single bridging transaction is verified helps with the security. I think something that is interesting and kind of ties into security / liveness or censorship resistance is that with a message-based bridge, the finality of a transaction or the finality of a bridging transaction has zero dependence on whether or not that transaction is profitable for some third party. And so if you're thinking about the security of a user's funds or the actual ability for that user to bridge those funds, the fact that it doesn't depend on any sort of profitability of some profit maximizing entity, I think is quite an important feature.
Well, you're conflating 2 things there, which is you're conflating execution probability with security, which are 2 very, very different things. So I would actually argue, unequivocally, that intents with a system that uses resource locks are, by definition, always going to be more secure from a security point of view than a message-based token. Not saying that message-based tokens aren't secure, but when you add a third counterparty in, which is the messaging protocol, you're adding in an extra layer where there could be some level of failure. Whether it might not even be, for example, a security failure. It might, for example, be in the context of O token specifically, you might have a DVN or an executor failure, where literally the DVN operator is not skilled enough and is not managing their gas efficiently enough to actually execute the transaction properly. If you have an exclusive DVN or something like that.
If you have an exclusive DVN,
sure,
which you don't necessarily have to do. But how would you settle a resource lock? How would you settle an intents-based protocol using resource locks without some sort of messaging?
You technically, look for example, a cross. A cross does not use any messaging whatsoever.
It uses canonical bridge messaging.
They have an oracle.
Their
own oracle. Look, I'm not saying that they're more secure. I'm just saying a resource lock is secure. I'm just saying. The less. You can even. There are a lot of ways. For example, people don't know this, but there was actually the first intense system ever was actually a Monero Bitcoin atomic bridge. You can
HTLC?
Yes, HTLC using no smart contracts, Monero to Bitcoin. No, they didn't need a messaging protocol.
But then at the end of the day, the security does come down to the verification, right? So it's the same.
Yeah, correct.
The
Verification what's your choice
of an intense-based system still comes down to messaging because messaging is the most secure form of settlement.
Some kind. You can use things there are some intense platforms that are building ZK proofs for this, so you don't need to, for example, use any kind of message. You can simply generate a proof that your transaction was executed on the destination chain.
But with a messaging protocol that has modular verification, you could include ZK proofs in that verification.
Sure, you can you can always wave your hand and be like, well, a thing that's general can add this other feature. Yes, of course.
It's a well-built
But I'm just saying, But I will agree that the one point you're right on there, regardless of the security point, is that the probability of execution with a message passing system is higher in theory.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it just depends on how good the solver is.
Yeah,
Is the
and
question.
you're right. It is like it's a conflation of two different points. But I think from the user's perspective, what they view as security is I give you my funds, will you give me my funds again?
These are the same users using BonkBot and paying like 2%. Like, you know, I don't know if they know too much about security. Private key and Telegram bot. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so I think to conclude,
Yeah.
security liveness is probably better for messaging because you can like always send a message through LayerZero.
Yep.
If there's no solver, there's no execution, so there's no point. But at the end of the day, security does come down to the verification and settlement. So security is the same for both.
Ultimately, yes, but on the individual user experience, it is not.
That depends on the protocol being used.
It depends on the mechanism for verification.
Okay, fine. So the next one is...
So to conclude, it depends.
Yes.
Trying to get the last word in every time. This guy, no.
Okay, fine. So the next category is speed. Do we actually disagree that intents are faster than OFTs?
Yeah, there's no way. You cannot make this argument that intents are not
Is there
faster.
a world where you can argue this?
Yes, I would like to bridge $100 million to Berachain.
That was not the question. It's not about size. Are they faster?
But yeah, without a doubt.
Yes, below $10,000 intents are faster, and that's why they're built.
Yes. Well, hold on. Below $10,000 now.
Yes.
Just because, okay, one thing I have to say about Stargate. Stargate is inherently an intense protocol. It's just an intense protocol where there's only one solver, and they're managing all of the capacity between the chains. And so, yes, of course, when you have a lot of capital lent to you, like via LPs, you absolutely are able to do $100 million plus transactions. But just wait, there will be solvers
that hold hundreds of million dollars across multiple different chains.
There are many
at the same
market
time.
makers. There are many market makers that on multiple centralized exchanges manage 9-figure portfolios.
Are they in the room with us here?
Huh?
Are they here? Like anyone?
Anybody from Wintermute, Jump, or Block Tower here?
No.
Okay, no, maybe not in this room. They're in Denver though.
Okay.
They're in Denver. Yeah.
I think for intents were built to be faster and cheaper than message-based bridging. I think a lot of fees have come down. They may no longer always be cheaper. I think it is very clear in the data that intents are faster below a certain size, but because of the finality risk and lack of liquidity that many solvers within the space face today, they cannot be faster above a certain size and actually don't work above an even larger size. So
It's certainly true, yeah.
speed is faster below for retail users, which is great.
Okay.
Yep.
So
for now.
we kind of going into the third one as well, which is size, right? Like liquidity and size.
Okay, sure.
OFTs,
of course, work better for size. Intents have a limitation.
I'll put a real caveat on this one that I actually think one place. So OFTs are specifically with regard to how do I move the same asset between two chains? Yes, absolutely. You have technically limitless to the total supply of the token ability to, for free, move assets between chains or via a small fee for like a Stargate pool for like ETH. But I don't think there's ever a world where there will be an inherent AMM or anything like for cross-chain swaps ever. So I think that's where yeah, sure, in bridging, size limitations are substantially better with large pools of capital via a Stargate structure, but the size of swaps you can do with direct OFTs is 0. So intents already, even with incredibly limited intense swapping that exists today.
But that is also a different debate. That is same chain swaps.
Well,
intents are better than
they
something
said
that doesn't
intents
offer.
versus O tokens, so I'm lumping intents all in one and O tokens all in one.
What are O tokens, first of all?
OFTs.
Please.
Okay.
Omni-chain tokens, I think.
Mint and burn tokens between two chains.
Okay.
Or any chains, yeah.
Yeah. I think, ultimately there isn't really a debate to be had on that point because the whole point of OFTs is you can move unlimited size between different chains. And to my point earlier, when a lot of the Boyko vaults for Berachain got moved from Ethereum over to Berachain, there were transactions for $133 million that you could not do using intents ever. Despite, I don't think that you
There
could
are
do it for
OTC transactions that big.
For free.
Without a doubt.
For free?
Well, OTC, again, for free, if it's a mint and burn, sure, I agree. I think in the limit, intense bridging is a market where solvers doing intense bridging, P&L goes to 0. But intense swapping and intense derivatives and intense multi-leg transactions, especially interacting with DeFi protocols, your size effectively grows exponentially as solvers increase in capacity. And with things like partial fills, for example, you can have an intent that's broken up by 5+ solvers executed across like multiple chains, like very, very easily.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
If margins are going to 0 for the solvers doing cross-chain bridging, why does everyone say that there will be more solvers?
Because there will be more solvers when cross-chain swapping facilities become available. I think like the I did a panel with Hart like last year on this, and like one of the things he said that I had no idea about, Hart from Across for reference, is that Across was built for cross-chain swaps, not for cross-chain bridging, which was very surprising to me because the 99% of their volume is cross-chain bridges. But I think a lot of intense protocols are seeing the writing on the wall in terms of like cross-chain bridging, and you're going to start to see, you're already seeing like little bits of it with like a lot of the meta aggregators doing things like an Across bridge or a Stargate bridge followed by a swap. That will get orders of magnitude better UX, where a user will be able to simply sign a message, for example, and then execute a multi-leg transaction across multiple chains into and out of multiple assets.
And this is where solvers do the hard part.
That's exactly. Solvers are like, I mean, there's somebody from Anoma here. I'm very offended that solvers are the term. It should be market makers. Solvers are market makers. Yeah.
Do you have any idea what percentage of Li.Fi's volume is swaps?
It's
cross-chain swaps.
It's like sub 1%.
no, it's higher, but it's like 10-15%.
Of swaps?
Yes.
On Across?
Of volume.
For our
is-
volume.
Yeah.
Oh, y'all's volume. Oh, sorry. I was like, Across? No way.
But
I
that's,
mean, they don't have the option.
yeah,
Exactly.
they don't have the, yeah, okay.
Well, you can call deposit and put your own swap order in. No one will fill it, but you can do it
I
technically.
mean, you can see why no one has done it.
Exactly. Yeah, they don't have quoting for it.
Yeah. Okay. So like, how do we actually scale intents in a way that is liquidity the only constraint here, or is there a world where intents can actually fill multi-million-dollar transactions?
No, it's a great question. I mean, I assume like anybody who's glued on Twitter like me, like saw that yesterday Citadel made the announcement they're going to become a liquidity provider in crypto. Like, one of the very counterintuitive things about market making that people don't really know is that market makers love when there's more than one market maker in a particular market, because it means whenever you start picking up like an unnecessary position, for example, you have a counterparty that's there always for you to offload that position onto, and vice versa. So the more liquidity providers you have in a particular market, the market gets exponentially more robust, more liquid, faster execution, tighter spreads, all of those things. So I think like liquidity begets liquidity. And so one of the things that like we're particularly trying to do is open source like non-alpha tools, but still very valuable tools for solvers. So like not strategies, but like here are contracts that you can use to do a direct counterparty execution, for example, between two counterparties on two chains. We're trying to open source even things like, for example, parts of our like DEX router. Like we wrote a DEX router for any on-chain DEX routing we want to do. We're open sourcing like the core engine of that. And so like it's going to be one of those things where like the only way intents will mature is if the number of solvers multiplies by 5 or 10. And like right now there's such a tiny handful of people actually solving at scale on any intents protocol that like once you start to see more solvers enter the space, that's when you'll see, intents absolutely explode as a market.
Angus, you want to say the quiet part out loud?
I just feel like lots of people have said that for a long time, that once more solvers are here, it will get better.
Well,
and I think there are a lot of pieces of tooling that will make that better, like better reference implementations, more open source protocols that you can build intents frameworks on top of. I struggle to see how it compares with something like a message-based bridge that's providing canonical bridging where you do not have any requirement for liquidity at all. Whereas with any sort of intents protocol, you not only have a requirement for liquidity on both sides of that bridge, but you also are limited by that liquidity.
I'll give like a 30-second story real quick, which is that people said the exact same thing about centralized exchange liquidity for years. They were like, centralized exchanges are going to, for example, like in 2019, 2020, people were saying that arbitrage on centralized exchanges was going to go to zero. Like, that is still by far one of the most profitable strategies run by market makers on centralized exchanges is arbitrage. Like, don't get me wrong, that market ended up collapsing in terms of like the average execution profit on a trade, but the amount of volume multiplied by something like 100x. So like, I think it's just one of those things where a lot of people in the intent space are way too optimistic, mostly to sell to VCs. But I think it might take multiple years. I wouldn't be shocked by that. I'm pretty conservative about that. Like, I think it'll be at least a few years before intents become as dominant as I expect, but For example, once the order flow starts, I mean, the order flow is already in the 9 figures daily across intense protocols for bridging. Just wait till you can perform a cross-chain swap on an intense protocol that's actually competitive with a centralized exchange, and you will see every single market maker that's big on centralized exchanges start to write strategies for intense fulfillment.
Do you disagree, though, that a message-based bridge scales better?
For bridging.
Yeah, for bridging, for going to new chains, which I think is what the
yes, that's the fourth one. Like,
sure.
In terms of chain expansion, which model scales better?
At the start, message-based bridging, but over time, intense are just how you multiply that volume by, an order of magnitude.
For retail flow.
For all flow. Like, whether it's OTC, whether it's derivative flow, whether it's spot asset flow, like every single traded asset class on a chain.
Don't you think that if you were, so for example, if you look at the USDT0 asset, which was issued, which launched a couple months ago, there was some very large movement of USDT between a few different chains where you can either, in a future world where the solvers appear, you can use solvers and pay them a fee for faster bridging, or you can use something like OFTs and bridge unlimited size in sub 15 seconds for free.
Again, I think that solvers in the future will primarily use things like O tokens for cross-chain rebalancing. I wouldn't disagree there in the slightest, but I expect 100% of retail order flow to move entirely to intense-based systems.
And so,
and even OT, professional market makers as well. Yeah.
And so, would you agree that to the user or the user experience, intense-based bridges are helpful and help to solve their problem, but actually solving the underlying interoperability problem, it is messaging and
I'd agree there. I think in an ideal world, no one but a professional solver or market maker ever interacts with an OFT. That's like
for bridging.
For bridging. For bridging. Yeah. I mean, it's fundamentally like infrastructure. Like it's like the true definition of like cross-chain infrastructure, whereas interfaces are a very different thing. Like I think the best example of this in TradFi is whenever you go to Robinhood and execute a stock trade or an equities trade or whatever you do, Robinhood is not where that trade gets cleared. Yep. That trade gets cleared, at some like filing cabinet at BNY Mellon's bank vault under their office. Yep. That's what it'll end up looking like. Is it's the actual like clearing at the very end of a day of trading. That's what OFTs I think will do long term.
Okay, so it sounds like they're not mutually exclusive, right? Like there's a world where intense and OFTs work together. So why do we keep debating this?
I don't know.
Content.
I have no idea. I think the best solution long term will be for the retail user and to fix the chain abstraction narrative. It will be an intense protocol based on top of a message-based bridge like Stargate.
Yeah. You're probably right. There. Yeah.
Anything else to add, or can we wrap it up?
I think intents get a bad name because a lot of
who gives them a bad name other than me?
The intense protocols themselves.
Oh, I see.
In many cases, I think there's so much work to be done on optimization of intense protocols that I really pray that intense protocols do not go down the same rabbit hole that DEXs did. DEXs spent the DEX people, smart engineers spent 5 years wasting time on building smart contracts for doing on-chain execution of trades and pricing and everything like that. And I really pray the intense space is not that stupid. And it really has an opportunity to be substantially better and completely change the way we think about cryptocurrency trading entirely.
How do we avoid that?
Not get nerd sniped into bad mechanism design. An intense system should be as minimally invasive between the solver and the counterparty as possible. And so the pricing should not be something determined by whoever's running the network or anything like that, or whoever's running that intense protocol. The pricing should be done directly between the solver and the counterparty.
I have a last minute question. So if the future of the space looks like both of these types of architectures working together, I think probably a lot of people have seen us talking about on Twitter that we think interop is solved because we think all of the pieces necessary on the messaging side are ready and available. Anything you want to build with interop, you can do based on messaging today. But it sounds like there's a long way to go for intents too.
Oh yeah, I mean people haven't even really figured out outside of basically running a centralized server off chain how to make perps in DeFi work. Like there are like some really ham-fisted examples that like kind of got off the ground. If you look at like something like GMX, for example, even Hyperliquid is like, it's good, but it's like not Binance, or Coinbase perps or anything like that. And so like I think where I guess like I kind of lost track on your question there, but I hope I answered it.
No, my question was just like, it sounds like messaging has all of the tools necessary to build interop on top of it, but intents have a long way to go.
Yeah, intents have a long way to go. Like I think spot intents are like almost there.
Yeah.
Like I think spot trading through intents is like so close. The problem is not as much the intents frameworks as it is the lack of competition among solvers. But I think like there's nothing, very, very little being done, for example, at least that I'm aware of, on like perps options, exotics, things like that in the intent space, where there's like potentially orders of magnitude of growth there.
Okay, thank you guys for debating this topic. Next time, maybe we can debate if interop is solved or not. But not today.
There's no debate.
There's no debate, no.
Sweet.
It
Thank you.
isn't. No, I'm kidding. Oh.